In recent news, there have been several incidents of carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae reported in an undisclosed hospital in Norman, Oklahoma. The rising number and incidents have prompted city officials to release a county-wide public service announcement in an effort to warn citizens of this dangerous superbug. Here's Watson Crick with the story.
Carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, also known as CREs, are a class of gram-negative bacteria that reside in the gastrointestinal tracts of humans and animals. Common species that make up this class include E. coli, Klebsiella, and Enterobacter. Before the emergence of CREs in the U.S. around 2000, clinicians relied heavily on a carbapenem antimicrobial class that included imipenem, meropenem, doropenem, and ertapenem to treat infections from these pre-resistant strains. Carbapenem resistance was first found in an enzyme-encoded transmissible gene identified in 2001. Since then, resistance has been on the rise, with meropenem resistance increasing nearly 5% and Klebsiella pneumoniae from 2004 to 2008. To understand this increase, we talked to a representative from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Louis Pasteur.
Antimicrobial resistance is passed down to progeny as bacterial cells replicate. In this case, carbapenem resistance is most likely due to porin mutations that inhibit beta-lactam interference and bacterial membrane integrity. These mutations evolved into highly specific enzymes called beta-lactamases that can have an effect on a wide spectrum of antimicrobials used today. Until now, carbapenem antimicrobial treatments have been relatively effective against these strains, signifying that continued mutations have made these microbes more resilient. In fact, the first clinical specimen from a patient infected with a highly resistant Klebsiella pneumoniae, which is a known CRE, was in 2001 from a hospital in North Carolina. The number of antibiotics effective in treatment of CREs is growing smaller and smaller as new strains of antimicrobial resistance are being discovered. About 4% of acute care hospitals have reported at least one case since discovery in 2000. That number has increased to 18% in long-term acute care hospitals. These infections are seen mostly within large teaching hospitals, where a large number of patients are being cared for by staff that have most likely never seen these types of cases before. These infections are highly contagious, spreading mostly through patient urine and blood. Those most at risk for contracting CRE are patients with recent organ or stem cell transplantation, those who have received mechanical ventilation, have had long-term exposure to antimicrobials, or had a longer length of stay in hospitals.
CREs are not just a problem for the U.S., but have become an international problem as well. In recent years, outbreaks have been reported in Israel, India, and the UK. Many of the incidents reported in the UK hospitals originate from patients that had traveled to and received initial treatment in India or Pakistan. Experts note that the spread of these microbes can be attributed to two main reasons. Oftentimes, medical personnel fail to recognize CREs as organisms that require rapid and specific medical attention. Most hospitals have never encountered situations with CREs and are therefore less likely to determine it as such. There is also a lack of immediate communication between infection prevention personnel and clinical lab personnel with hospital staff. This lack of communication makes diagnosis slower. Immediate diagnosis is essential in combating these deadly superbugs, as mortality rates have increased to about 40 to 50%, with septicemia being the deadliest. Here to talk to us about potential treatments available for CRE-related infections is Dr. Graham Stain of Stevenson Medical Center.
CRE-related infections are normally very hard to diagnose, but once a diagnosis has been made, it is relatively easy to confirm. This can be done with a modified Hodge test, which involves growing clinical isolates and testing for antimicrobial resistance. Rectal cultures are also useful in identifying CRE infection. As of right now, treatment involves the use of currently available antimicrobials with a wide spectrum of effectiveness. Colicin has an average rate of 66% effectiveness, followed by tigecycline at 59% and fosfomycin at 15%, all with their own limitations as their effectiveness decreases with time. A new possible treatment is oral gentamicin that has been tested in recent years with 66% eradication rate of newer, more virulent CRE strains. Although proven relatively effective, this new treatment will not be available until more research and testing can be conducted. There are many challenges to treating these types of infections. Most of the drugs I mentioned as effective are considered last resort drugs. Should the antimicrobial prove ineffective, the number of other antimicrobials that can be used is slim. Oftentimes, there are problems with susceptibility testing, or testing what drugs are more effective depending on the particular strain, and this can take time that the patient may not have. Another problem is the increased toxicity of more powerful antimicrobials we must use, which can severely affect patient health and comfort. The list of treatment options gets smaller and smaller as these microbes evolve and become more deadlier. We remain hopeful that in the years to come, more effective antimicrobials will be discovered and synthesized to overcome these new CRE strains.
What can doctors and patients dealing with CRE do to minimize infections?
The key to minimizing the prevalence of CRE incidents in hospital settings is thorough surveillance of patients with potential CRE infections and strict contact precautions. Hospitals may need to dedicate certain rooms, equipment, and staff members to CRE patients. The staff should be alerted when any of the CRE patients are transferred into or out of the designated CRE area. The staff needs to be aware of the CRE infection rates and risks. Doctors and all other healthcare providers will need to make sure that they are using soap and water before and after touching a patient's body or tubes that go into a patient's body. Also, a medical gown and gloves should always be worn when dealing with CRE patients. Patients are asked to keep their hands clean as well. This means washing hands before meals, before and after touching their eyes, nose, or mouth, and before and after changing wound dressings. An overall decrease in antimicrobial use can be highly effective in ensuring a decrease in resistance of future CRE strains. This bacterium can be deadly if not handled properly.
Thank you, Dr. Stain. Back to you, Rosalind.
Thank you, Watson Crick. After this short break, an update on this week's weather and a story of a local professor, Dr. Stevenson, and his work that won him a Nobel Peace Prize.